Hey guys, what's up? What is up? My name is Kuya Jason from Our Life in the Philippines, and today I'm going to be giving you 5 tips to build a house in the Philippines. Listen along as I'll give you my 5 tips to help you from making some of the same mistakes that I've made, and I really wish I would have had these 5 tips before I started building. Do you want to have something like this? This is our house. This is a 3-bedroom, 2 CR, which is a comfort room. It is 110 square meters, and everything, house, the perimeter wall, the driveway, and even the carport was 3.5 million pesos, all in. That does not include the price of the land, which I'll get into. So stay tuned. I'm going to give you my 5 tips to help you along the way. All right, guys. Tip number 1, know your budget. How much do you actually have to spend on a house like this? Well, keep in mind that having money is one thing, especially if that money's in the United States. Getting the money over here to the Philippines, that's a whole nother story. And I'll tell you how I did it. I would transfer a little at a time. There is a limit on how much you can transfer per month or have in your bank at once. So plan in advance. When it comes to your budget, you're going to need to get your money from the US over here to the Philippines. I personally used a company called Remitly. It's an app on your phone. And I would transfer 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 at a time into my wife's bank. I personally don't have a bank in the Philippines. That just causes a lot of headaches when it comes to doing annual reports and finances. So I would transfer money into my wife's account. It took quite a while to get 3.5 million pesos from the US over here. So before you go starting to, do anything else, you need to figure out what your budget is and how you're going to get your money from there to here. There are many different ways to do that. You could do bank-to-bank transfer. And again, there are limits on how much you can transfer per month. I believe the current limit is 500,000 pesos per month. So start early, get your money over here. Once you get your money over here and you figure out how much your budget is, let's just give you an example. Let's say that over the period of 6 months, you were able to transfer 3 million pesos over here. You need to leave room for other things such as permits, title fees. There's a lot of hidden fees. I'm not going to go over all those little fees for you, but you need to do your own research and find out, all these little extras. Also, leave enough room for furniture, extra paint, supplies. You're not going to move into a brand new house fully furnished. You're going to have to buy things. Things such as refrigerators, furniture. I mean, you guys are smart. You know what I'm talking about. This furniture set out here was like 10,000 pesos. So you're talking 200 bucks. Not much. Everything's cheaper here. But maybe refrigerators, air cons, if they're not included in your contract price. They're normally not. Air cons, they're not very cheap. That's a 2.5 horse, and that was about 30,000, which is close to $600. So make sure that you have enough in your budget extra for surprises and furnitures and stuff like that. All right, let's move on to step number 2. All right, guys, I'm going to sit down for this one. Step 2, buying land. Philippines, believe it or not, is not really that big, but there are lots of ways to buy land. There is lots of land available if you're looking for it. Some tips that I want to give you when shopping for land, usually, let's say Marketplace. If you go to Marketplace, you're going to see tons of land for sale, and you're going to notice that the same parcel of land is being sold by 4 or 5 different people trying to sell the same exact piece of land. What normally happens here in the Philippines is, let's say somebody wants to sell some farmland, and they'll put a post on Facebook Marketplace. Somebody will contact that person and say, hey, I'll help you sell your land for a percentage. So then that person wants to sell it. Well, then another guy contacts the seller and says, hey, I'll sell your piece of land for a portion. Well, it's not like the US where you have one realtor. You're going to have like 5 or 6 different people trying to sell the same land. And the prices are not always the same, because if they can mark up the price to make a little more commission, they'll do that. So when shopping for land, be very careful about finding a clean title. You'll see a lot of people will sell their brother's land or their father's land or somebody's land, and they don't even have the title for it. Also on a title, there's usually multiple people that need to sign that title to actually sell that land. Let me just give you an example. When we bought our land, we were shopping on Marketplace, also word of mouth, asking relatives and friends, hey, do you know anybody selling some land? So we ended up finding a piece of land, and we agreed on a price. And I didn't know at the time that there were multiple people on this title. So I bought the land from an old lady, and we didn't have an attorney present. We didn't do a notary. We just had a piece of paper drawn out. I signed it. My wife signed it. They signed it. It was a woman and her son signed it. So a year passes, and we still don't have a title for the land. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I contacted, I think it was a city engineer, and I said, hey, what's going on with the title on this land? And they said, well, the seller never paid any of the fees. They never did any of the paperwork. I'm like, what the heck? So I had to end up hiring people to basically start from scratch, redo everything. And then it took another year. So you're not going to get a title overnight. It's not like in the US where you're going to get a title in a month or 2. It's going to take a while. So be prepared for that. Go ahead and buy your land in advance. Make sure you have an attorney. Make sure you do everything properly. Get everything notarized. And then you should actually go to the town and go to the municipal hall or the city office and go ahead and pull the title on that land and find out who all is on that title. It's called a mother title. Pull the mother title, find out, if it's even available to be sold and who all is on that title and who needs to sign. I know I don't want to sound like I'm rambling on. In my experience, there was like 3 sons that 2 of them had to fly in from Manila to actually sign the title to do it properly. So once we got everything done, also another thing, do not start building without title in hand. It is very possible to build on somebody's land and then find out that you can't get a title. And then you got a house built on somebody else's land. So don't do that. If you're gonna buy land, also Americans cannot own land, so it has to be put in your wife's name. Not a big deal. I mean, if you get married in the Philippines especially, there's no divorce, so don't worry about that. So that's enough I'm gonna say about that. Let's move on to number 3. The next step is going to be to have a plan, drawings, sketches. You want to have something in mind before you even start talking to contractors. What I would recommend is start with a piece of paper and a pencil and a ruler and just start sketching out, what your idea is. It's very important to have an idea of what the square meters is. And the reason is, and I'll get into that in step 4, which is finding a contractor. Most contractors over here will just quote you based on your square meters. And when it goes on square meters, it goes from the corner of the house to the corner, to the corner, to the corner. So that would include like a carport. When I built this house, I did the carport separate because I didn't want that square meter per meter price on the carport, because if you think about it, there's no walls, there's no windows, there's no doors. It's just a concrete slab and a roofing, with some ceiling and lights and whatever. But if you were to build this by yourself, this is not going to cost the same as this. So if you're going to get a carport, you may want to get that quoted separately. That's what I did. Also, I got quoted separately the driveway and the perimeter wall. And again, when they quote that, they're gonna quote you by meter, either by square meter for the driveway or by linear meter on the wall. So what I actually did was I used a couple different programs on my iPad to get a rough estimate of what I wanted. How many rooms, how many bathrooms, doorways, windows. I pretty much had everything drawn out. So then I actually bought a game on Xbox. It was called Architect for Life, I think. And then I really got in there and did all the fine details. Once you get all that, once you pretty much know exactly what you want, definitely important to know exactly what you want, even down to like lights, light fixtures, air conditioning placements, how many windows, the types of windows, the types of doors, everything. Any little designs, porches, steps, everything. The more you have, the better. Because when you go to a contractor, you want to get the most accurate price possible because, like I said before, you have a budget and you don't want to go over that budget, and you definitely want to have some cushion in that budget. So draw everything out, have a plan, right? Have drawings, have a plan. Before you move on to step number 4, let's get into it. All right, Snoopy. Step 4, finding a contractor. That's really not that hard to do. What I did, my personal experience, first talk to family, say, hey, do you know any contractors? Everybody knows contractors, but not everybody is a contractor. Joe Schmo down the street can lay blocks and calls himself a contractor, but he's not a contractor. Make sure you find an actual, legitimate, licensed contractor. So once you definitely talk to a lot of different contractors. Once you find different contractors, show them your plan, and most likely they're going to quote you by square meter. So just an example, let me tell you my example. So the first guy I talked to, right away, he could tell I was American, so the price was 45,000 pesos per square meter. That's outrageously high. So then I had my wife contract some contractors, and then the price started coming down. If they know you're American, you're going to pay a premium. So the second contractor we contracted was a woman, and she was $35,000 per square meter. And also they tell you there's different finishes, like a basic finish, a more premium finish, and then like a higher end finish. So they may tell you 30,000 per square meter for basic, 35 for the next level up, 40,000 for premium finish. And what they're talking about is the finishing on the walls, the window seals, types of windows, any kind of trims inside the house, different paints. So that's what they're talking about when they talk about finishes. So I ended up going on Marketplace, and I was getting mad. I was like, man, everybody's giving me different prices. They're going from 20,000 to 50,000 per square meter. So I went on Marketplace, and I just put a ad in the local community Facebook group. Said, hey, looking for a good contractor to build a house. Well, right away I got like 10 people messaging me, and I would go through and I would talk, kind of like interviewing, right? Talk to people for 10, 15 minutes, usually through chat. It's kind of hard to communicate over the phone because of the accent, and sometimes people don't speak as clearly with their English, which is, honestly, you're in the Philippines, so don't expect too much. So I chatted with like 4 or 5 different people, and I would show them my plan. Hey, this is my idea. Originally it was 90 square meters is what I came up with. And I said, this is the plan. How much could you do this for? So we would go back and forth. A couple guys you can just cut out right away. If they're telling you 40,000 per square meter, 35 per square meter, I don't have time for that. Just cut them out. They're out of your budget. So finally, once you settle on a contractor, which I did, I settled on Jeremiah at JLC Builders. I had him draw up the contract, and it's very important to use good materials. When building a house, don't use those handmade, 4-inch CHB, concrete hollow block. Don't use them 4-inch handmade crap. You want to use good materials. So on our house, I actually used 5-inch machine made, and they had to be driven in all the way from Tarlac, so pretty far away. But I wanted the best materials. So make sure they're using, in the contract, make sure it specifies 5 or 6-inch machine-made concrete hollow blocks. And then when it comes to steel, like these tubes, they call these tubular, make sure you get the thickness on these, because they do come in like really thin-walled, and then you got the thicker. So like I made sure I got all the thicker steel tubular, even down to the 1 and 2-inch. And then the material for the roofing, you want to get the thicker materials. They're usually 3 different types. They got your budget friendly, which I think was 0.3 millimeter, and then the thicker, which was like 0.5 millimeter, and then the thickest, which you really don't need, is for like industrial, which I think was like 0.8. Don't quote me on that, but so I definitely said, I want the better material. And then when it comes to things like this stuff is actually really expensive. This translucent paneling, so that was all included in the budget. And then when it comes to the soffits, we call them soffits, I went with the aluminum. Probably wouldn't recommend going with the cheaper PVC, so make sure you get the better material for that. And then anything else, make sure it's included, like your grates for your security bars for your windows. Make sure, try to get as much detail as possible on that contract so there's no surprises later on. Make sure they're using the best cement mix, sand, concrete, all that. You want the best. You want a house that's going to last. And if anything else is included, like your air cons, make sure that's written in there. Make sure everything, as much detail as you can get in there. Just an example, the first contract my contractor sent over was like 3 or 4 lines, just basically the price. And I said, that's not gonna do. I need more detail. So yeah, that's my advice for that. Contractor, marketplace, but interview them. Oh, and another thing, make sure they speak English. That's very helpful when building a house, because you're gonna be up here every day. Also the timeline, make sure they give you a timeline. This whole thing was built in 15 weeks. My whole Filipino 3.5 million mansion, 15 weeks. That's unheard of. That included the walls, the driveway, the carport, everything. So, all right, let's move on to the last step. Step 5. Step 5 is also going to be with the contract. Like I said, make sure everything is included in there. And then when it comes to workers, so the way it works in the Philippines, the workers are actually going to move into your land. They're going to move onto your property. So you want to specify in advance, you want to find out all the details about their barracks. So when they moved into my land, our land, it's actually my wife's land. When they moved in, they built a barracks, a temporary shelter right there on the property. And either all the crew or half the crew is gonna stay every day. They're gonna live on your property as they're building your house. So what I did in advance was I built a gazebo. And if you've seen my previous videos, this actually had a storage so they could store some tools. It had benches, it had tables, which I ended up tearing all that out because I don't need it now. But now I got a nice place to park my motorcycle. So yeah, they're gonna be staying on your property. So you wanna get all that situated in advance. If you can, you would like to get some electric run to your property and some water. The easiest thing I found, and this is my experience, was the very first thing I did was I built this pump house with a different, I didn't even use a contractor for this. I just hired some local guys. Built this pump house, had a drill, a well drilled, had all that done in advance. And this gave me a reason to get electricity installed. So once I had title in hand, I had the well drilled. They put the motor, the tank. Then I was able to contact the electric company and actually have electric installed. So yeah, if you can, be prepared for these guys moving into your property. Water, electric, and then lastly would be food. It is highly possible that you're responsible for feeding these workers every day. They eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They get snacks, they get drinks, and they're staying here overnight, so they need clean water to drink. So you need to specify with your contractor in advance, hey, am I responsible for feeding these guys? Providing them with clean water? You need to know in advance. Luckily, I was not. My contractor was up here every day. He provided food, drinks, water. They actually drank the water from the well, which I don't drink, but they did. And lastly, sewage. You're going to have a lot of guys up here, right? So they're going to be, using the bathroom quite a lot. So what they actually did on our property was they dug a huge pit over there in the corner. They put a concrete slab, they put a toilet, and they put walls up so they could use the bathroom. So keep that in mind. Food that goes in must come out. All right, guys, that was my 5 tips. I'm sure there's more tips out there. Maybe I'll make another video later on. I just really wanted to get this information out to you guys, to you expats. Anybody thinking about moving over here, buying land, building a house, hopefully this video will help you out a little bit. Check out our other videos. I documented the whole experience from building the house, from day one, buying the land, all the way to building the pump house, drilling the well, everything. 15 weeks to get everything done. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, peace.